and the item goes to the next one, 8, right? And so we keep going down here, and we notice, though, that we get a count of 6 at the end, right? So that last character, that one at position 37, and you know that's position 37, that's s dot length minus 1, because this goes up to one less than this, so you know the string's length is 38, right? So anyway, 37th is the last character. You can see the accumulator is 5, so the count of the characters up to but not including position 37 is the count of the punctuation symbols there is 5, right? And then it reads that exclamation point as a punctuation symbol, and it bumps you up to 6, and that's your final accumulator. But the problem is, if you count the number of punctuation symbols here, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, not 6. So what's the problem here? Well, if you noticed what we did, because we started the ACC, we didn't give it an initial value. It just used the 0, which was what we wanted, because we wanted to start the count at 0. So that was sort of perfect. And if you didn't have a punctuation symbol at the beginning, you wouldn't even necessarily notice that it was wrong, because it wouldn't be wrong, right? But because we have a punctuation symbol at the beginning, and because then item is going to start at 1 now, right? Now you have the problem where the first character you're checking is the is s of 1. So you never actually check the 0th character, and you started the accumulator at 0. Now, if you had started the accumulator at 1, that would be fine. But the accumulator is starting at 0, and you wouldn't always want to start it at 1, because you wouldn't. First of all, there would be two things. Number one, if you started it with 1, it would gave it a starting accumulator of 1, then it actually would start the item at 0. The first or the first one in the list here, and it would check s of 0. So you can see if you started at 1, instead of getting 6, right, you're getting 8. And again, there are 7 punctuation symbols here that are exclamation points, periods, or question marks. So you don't want to start it at 1. And the other reason you wouldn't want to start it at 1 is if that first symbol weren't like an exclamation point here, right? So we're just, let's say, an A, we would want to get out 6, not 7, right? So we would not want to start the count at 1 anyway in that case, right? Because that 0th symbol is not an exclamation point. So that's fine, though, because remember we said that the way we set this up, right, it should be the number of punctuation symbols up to but not including that position, right? So when we're at index 3, it means we've checked indices 0 through 2, but we haven't actually checked index 3 yet. So really the final fix is just to start the accumulator at what we would start the count, and that's 0. And if we start the accumulator at 0, then the item itself will start at 0 as well, and it will check this 0th character, and the accumulator you see goes up to 1, because for the first exclamation point, and then 2 for the second exclamation point, right? So again, it's really just knowing what what the relationship between the item and the accumulator is. Here, the accumulator represents the number of punctuation symbols up to but not including this index here, right? So again, just like the last one, we can change it so that it includes that first one by checking. I won't write it here again. But you could go back to the previous video. You could actually check if that first symbol is a punctuation mark or not, or the 0th symbol is a punctuation mark or not, essentially rewriting this condition, plugging in 0 for each one, and use that ternary operator as we said. So we put s of 0 equals period, or s of 0 equals question mark, or s of 0 equals exclamation point. We put a question mark So if it's true, we would want to start the accumulator at 1. Otherwise, we would want to start the accumulator at 0. Each time we would be checking s of index plus 1, right, instead of s of index. Again, go to the previous video if you want to see that, and then you would stop at s dot length minus 1. But for now, I'm just leaving this as it is. So when you take the exam question, right, you're going to have to say the error numbers and then put in the correct, the code that should replace it that's correct here. So here we replaced this and with ORs. Again, the way you have to enter it in is without spaces. Over here you would replace return index plus 1 with return ACC plus 1. Again, you wouldn't have the space between the plus. You would replace the return index with the return ACC, and the final one starting with ACC of, you would write starting with ACC of 0. Right, so I can just switch over now and just show you what you would be typing in. So you're replacing 1 with I'll just take this code here and copy it and make the changes. Get rid of the spaces between the braces, square braces. Again, this is really just because Canvas, if I put spaces here, if I didn't put spaces here, it would actually put this as one of the possible answers, or one of the answers that you're like filling in the blank with. It uses square brackets and the name here to say, it's just another blank with that name. So in order to make sure Canvas doesn't do that, I put spaces, but you don't need spaces. Anyway, you don't really need to know that unless you're using Canvas to make quizzes, right? So the point is, I'm just taking these, changing the ands to the ors, getting rid of any spaces here that are unnecessary, which is really all of them in here. And yeah, so that would be your answer here. And then the next one, you're going in order, return index plus 1. Instead of return index plus 1, you want to return, I'll just type this out, return ACC plus 1. Right, and again, make sure you include the return there. You need the space because otherwise it would get confused, return ACC. And then the next one, 3, right, we're replacing that with return ACC. And then finally, this starting with ACC of, copy this whole thing, right, we're going to make that, we're just going to take that and put a 0 in there, and then just make this 5. So the point is, when you do this, make sure you literally type in everything here. So you want it to start the ACC at 0, don't just write 0 here. Write starting with ACC of 0. Otherwise, I'll have to go back and manually fix those mistakes that you made, or not really the mistakes you made, where you had it correct, and then Canvas didn't know that you had it correct. So okay, so that's really about it for this lecture. So again, make sure to do some of the exercises where you have these repeat for every items and an if-else. So there's a condition to determine how the accumulator is going to change from one row to the next, right? So one way it changes one way, where it's bumped up by 1, and the other one it changes so it stays the same.